in their own role of regulating the market.
Thank you.
And excuse me, I'm Julie Bishop. I'm the director of the Law Centres Network. Just in a sentence, for those of you who don't know law centres, we say, are not-for-profit legal practices. To be a law centre, you must employ at least 2 lawyers, and law centres can have, larger law centres will have 30 or more lawyers in them, so they really vary in size in terms of what they do. And the area of law that we work in is what in the United States is called poverty law, but here we call it social welfare law, so housing, debt, welfare benefits, etc.
Great, thank you. And I think in some of the other sessions we've picked up on the importance of trying to understand what your clients want, but also what potential clients might want in how to shape your business. So I can just start with a sort of general opening question. I mean, what do you think people want when it comes to legal services, and how do people go about finding and choosing the, I was going to say lawyer, but not lawyer, the service or the help that they need? Perhaps I start with you, Julie.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think as law centres, we're in a slightly different position because the people that we serve are usually desperate for a lawyer. Our issue is managing demand. It's not finding clients. So first of all, who are our clients? Law centres see around 250,000 people a year. It's limited by the funding we receive rather than by the potential. Since the legal aid cuts, we now only take on average 1 in 3 cases. The client community that we work with are vulnerable, obviously, but I think all of you know who are lawyers that any single person can be vulnerable in a particular situation. You know, what stress does to people and how they behave under those conditions really does change how they might be seemingly a very able person who manages their life well. So that's to say most our clients are within that situation, but by and large, they're people without means. We're seeing more and more clients who have no income, that is completely destitute, where over half our clients are women, low English proficiency, born in other countries, but very high levels of people with disability. That's our client pool. We find the biggest problem amongst our client group in general is their ability to find a lawyer who has the expertise that they need. Immigration's a case in point. There are, since the cuts to legal aid, lots and lots of people no longer practice immigration law. And I was very interested in the session beforehand because although funding is always a challenge for organisations like ours, in fact, our biggest challenge at the moment is recruitment and how we're going to build the next generation of what we call social welfare lawyers, because a lot of universities now no longer even run what they used to call the legal aid pathway. So even at the student level, we're having to do more and more work to interest people in it.
Okay. Do we have any legal aid lawyers in today, or legal aid law firms? Okay, we've got a few. Okay, so is there any? How are you kind of changing or seeing changes that might help this situation going forward?
I think one thing I didn't mention is that when I say the issue for us is managing demand, the key drivers for demand at this point in time isn't simply the legal aid cuts and the lack of legal aid lawyers, but in fact it's an impact of changes in policy. So the hostile environment, universal credit, and the generic 0-hour contracts. So more and more people are living in poverty with extreme legal situations, and what we find is the people we work with in fact, aren't help seekers by and large. So when we see them, we either meet them at housing duty court scheme, as you would know. We see them when it comes to a time of crisis. So that's necessary background to talk about what are we doing today to try and meet this demand. And so it does bring me back to funding. I don't like to bang on about funding because all of you, are used to people like me saying, give us money, give us money, give us your lawyers, give us everything. So I won't mention that specifically, but what we have really had to do since 2013 is think, if we have £1,000, how is that £1,000 best spent? Where do we get the most impact out of that money? So we have probably three things in general. The first thing is we thought, how are our legal skills best used? As those of you who do legal aid, and in fact most lawyers know that once someone has a legal problem, there are a whole lot of other things that have led to that. The legal problem is at the end of other things that have gone wrong in people's lives. So we're thinking more and more about what we say, inserting our legal skills into broader social interventions. So an example of that is we have one project at the moment with a charity that works with people with intellectual disabilities. So they're adults who are trying to live independently. As you can imagine, legal issues arise in that situation. So we work with the charity to try and upskill them to identify legal problems earlier. Plus, when a legal problem does arise, we can we can be there to provide that assistance. So that's an example. Rather than sitting around waiting for someone to come, we're trying to identify situations in which the client community that we serve may have a legal problem. That's number one. Number two is our most expensive resource is lawyer time. How can we privilege that lawyer time? How can we use it as well as we can? What are other things that we can do in a way? And that's obviously what leads us directly into digital work and the sort of innovation or changes that we're trying to do there. And I think later on I'll probably tell you about what that work looks like. But they're the two ends we've been looking at: how to use our legal skills more effectively and how to use our lawyer time to the maximum effect.
And as you say, that's applicable to all different types of firm. So Lola, if I can ask you, panel obviously done research, have a keen interest in what people want from legal services, how they go about finding and choosing a lawyer. So what's your kind of insight on that, please?
The panel for the last 7 or so years have been doing research. It's a longitudinal research. Every year we ask users of legal services how they choose their lawyer. And nothing much has changed over the last 7 years. Mostly it's still by reputation. And that is a problem for the panel because we want consumers to shop around more. We want them to be more active in the market because we think that being passive is not really going to help with competition, creating more competition in the market. In terms of what consumers want, I was thinking about this myself yesterday evening. I don't think they want anything different from what they expect from another professional. I know when I make the comparison with going to a dentist, you're all going to shoot me down. But when I go to my dentist, I want to know how much things are going to cost. I want to know how long it's going to take. I want to know if there's going to be any likely complications that's going to mean an increase. I took an opportunity to ask a family member who's just been through a divorce yesterday. I said, how did you find a lawyer? He said, I asked my friend. I said, so what else did you do after you asked your friend? She said, nothing. I asked, were you happy? No. And everything she said about not being happy where things that were preventable. So she said she was quoted 2,500. She ended up paying just over 10,000. Now, when you hear that, you think, oh my God. But that was because she went to litigation. But that wasn't explained to her at the very beginning. So those are the things that are avoidable. And it's not too, I mean, that's an anecdote, but it's not too dissimilar from what we get back from the actual research, that people aren't shopping around, that price does matter, especially matters when you're a vulnerable consumer, that, specialism does matter as well. And that, in some areas, things like having a local office also is very important to consumers.
Okay, thank you. So same question to you, Rachel. What do you think people want from legal services, and how do people go about finding and choosing a lawyer from a different perspective?
Yes, a completely different perspective. I'm a small firm, and the vast majority of our clients are very affluent. When I set my practice up, I took a step back and I thought, well, what would I want from a law firm? And I think what it came down to for me, and I am apparently a millennial, is I want a bit of choice. I want an online option, but I also want a real face-to-face meeting with a solicitor, if that's appropriate, based on the level of knowledge I have on my legal problem. So that's why, from the off, I wanted to create a firm that has a real person behind it, but also the online offering, if that's what you choose to do, also has a real person at the end of it. And I think there's also opportunity for us as regulated solicitors, and that's something I will get on my soapbox about if I get half a chance, is that I think we need to push for the fact that as solicitors regulated and authorised by the SRA, we can be innovative, but we need to educate the public about the benefits of using an authorised and regulated firm, because there are lots of new entrants to the market, and I think if we don't play on that, then we're going to be missing a trick.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. In fact, my next question was going to be, where do you think those in the legal sector might be missing a trick in meeting their needs and growing their business? So, missing a trick number one from Rachel is really promoting, so both regulation, but I guess also what the unique qualities and selling points of your particular firm are. So why should somebody go to you rather than an unauthorised business, but also to another business of any type?
I think you have to try and be different, and we try and learn a huge amount from feedback that we make sure we get from each and every client that we service. We try to be as transparent as we possibly can. I mean, the fact that you now put your charges on your website for various types of work, I thought was great. When I first set up my practice, I had done that, and then I took it off. So it's nice to have it back on again, because I think that clients aren't too concerned about high fees. They just want to know how much things are going to cost. And I in no way want to have a firm that is the cheapest. I think then you end up being in a race to the bottom, and service and quality of the advice that you give can suffer. But I think it just goes back to giving the clients a choice about how they want their legal matter to be dealt with, and transparency about the benefits of using a solicitor to tackle your legal problem rather than going elsewhere.
Okay, Lola, I see the same question.
Yeah. So the question was, where might they be missing a trick?
Missing a trick, yeah.
Well, I think that you really have to look at your consumers and understanding their needs and responding to their needs. So, for example, our tracker survey has shown over the years that there is a difference in the way that ethnic minority consumers experience the market, legal services market. Our data also shows that when you look at services like wills, for example, that ethnic minority consumers, especially Africans, are less likely to have wills. So as providers in the market, is anyone really tapping into the possibility that there might be an opportunity here to provide those groups with this service? Of course, that might entail some more work. Technology in particular is really interesting and really important to the panel. So we know that there's a large unmet legal need. We know that technology can fill the gap and meet some of these unmet legal needs. But is the technology that you're using designed to provide good outcomes for consumers? Is it meeting the access to justice gap? Because that is an area where you can really be gaining more business.
Yeah. Is this working better now? Yeah. In terms of what do our clients want and need, I also think it's the same as everybody else. I mean, except there's one difference. Our clients, when they come to us, are scared, and probably the biggest reason they haven't sought out legal help, even if they know it, is because often their experience of the law has been in association with something bad that's happened to them before. There's a saying that poor people aren't like rich people, just without the money. And what that goes on to say is that poor people, because of the nature of their lives, they're always bumping up against sharp legal corners. So for them, an interface with the law usually means something bad's about to happen. So they're very reluctant to come to lawyers. So what does that mean? What do they need? Beyond all else, exactly the same as any other client. They want expertise, they want their problem solved, and they want to feel like they're being treated fairly. And I think that's universal. And they want you to spend the time with them, and that's something that less and less as not-for-profits we're able to do, because we're under the cosh as well with legal aid and everything else. But they do want that time, and they want respect. But that leads me in directly to, are we missing a trick here? Because all of you are aware of the court reform program, digitisation, lots of talk about people who are digitally challenged or isolated, or lots of terms like this. There's an assumption, our people can't do this. Actually, it's not true. It's not true. What our people can do is they all have a mobile phone, but they don't have credit. So they all use their phone, but they go to McDonald's to access credit. And they also all have the same expectation that we all have of what a service is, how to interface with that service. They want instant response. They want to be able to look up online, etc. But the other trick we're missing is that we associate that access, being able to get information, being able to download documents, being able to self-serve, even if they're able to, with access to justice. That's access, it's access to information, but it's not problem resolution, and it's not justice. So I think the second trick we're missing, and I was the third trick now, your point about there's a real lawyer. I think if we keep the Sainsbury's model in mind, you all would have had frustration using the self-checkout. When did that start to work? It started to work once they had a person standing there coming up and saying, can I help you with that? That is when people started using self-checkout. So I think for organisations like ours, it's not to be patronising, it's not to go on about what people can't do, it's rather to understand what they can do, how they want to work with us, speaking to them. All our digital work has been developed in conjunction with clients, speaking to them, find out what they do like, what they don't like, and always having a person there as well to accompany that journey.
Thank you. We've got any questions at this stage? Yeah, okay. Let's start over here. Thank you.
Thanks. Joe Egan from Joe Egan Solicitors in Bolton. I hear what you say about clients picking solicitors by reputation and there not being enough competition in the market. I've been running a firm for over 30 years, and it's grown and developed, and we've depended very much on our reputation. But to say it's not competitive, I mean, every client that comes across our doorstep, we've beaten about 30 other firms in our town too. And the price of conveyancing has been kept down for decades because of the fact that firms are so competitive. So I'm a bit surprised by that. One of the things that I have noticed recently when I ask clients why they've come to us is they say, well, we've seen you on the internet. And given that, you know, I don't think we spend very much on our website at all, it's a surprise. And what they've said is that they were looking for a legal solution. They knew what the problem was, that there was a legal solution. So they looked on the internet and found 4 or 5 firms. And then they looked at reviews. And I mean, is that the experience of the panel, that's what people are doing these days, or
Well,
in choosing solicitors?
that would be shopping around. So going onto the internet, seeing at least 4 different firms and then making a choice, and then actually going on and looking at reviews, that would be shopping around. I think what I'm talking about is not even making any other references or looking at any other place aside from one word of mouth recommendation, because you can imagine my sister, I wasn't going to say it was my sister, but my sister.
From video, please.
Why didn't she ask you?
And she didn't ask me. She didn't, and this is the thing, she didn't even ask me how she might go about finding a solicitor. But she asked one person, and I didn't even ask her because she might have asked one person whose lawyer did something completely different to family law. So going back to our data, only 27% shop around. That shows that there's a slight problem. There's no issue with word of mouth, especially if it's good, and especially if the consumer could verify that or at least look at reviews. But when only 27% are shopping around in the market, I think there's a lot. There's room for improvement.
Can I just, sorry, Christine Pitt, Cole Solicitors. Can I just ask you, you were saying about shopping around 27%. Is that in every single area of law?
It's lower in some areas of law.
Because I think it would be interesting to know the breakdown. As a family lawyer, I think everybody goes to every single firm in a 20-mile radius for a free first interview.
Our data isn't showing us that even for family law it's considerably higher. For probate, we know it's lower. It's actually lowest with probate at 16%. Family, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's certainly nowhere above 35% who shop around in that market.
Is the probate market not dominated by the co-op who sort of ring you up the day after you book the funeral? Is that not the reason that people don't shop around in probate?
Maybe. Maybe.
So, does anyone else on the panel have any sort of views on this around, I guess, around the use of reviews and how firms can distinguish themselves? But it's really interesting to hear the sort of different viewpoints from the people on the ground and what's happening. And the research does pretty clearly show that people will go on a recommendation and don't shop around. But if we could start with on that kind of review point, is that becoming more prevalent? Is it likely to become more sort of prevalent in the future? I could perhaps start with Julie on this one.
Look, I think
on to Rachel.
as you were talking, I was thinking that at my office, being the sort of head office, so to speak, we don't provide any advice. We're not qualified or insured to do so. However, we get calls all day long, and all those people, well, a lot of them are wrongly referred to us, but of those who aren't, they've come via the internet and they just Google law, because we now say, how did you find us? Well, I Googled law. And they just move on down, even though it's very clear if they even then went to our website, they would see that we don't do anything to do with parking fines, a very popular thing. For people who don't want to pay, they probably look law-free and come to us. But people do have a look, but they don't interpret that information well. They just have a look and then they try any old number, and then by the time they get to us, they're usually really angry that we won't help them. Someone's told them we'll help them, etc. But I do think in general, people don't well, lawyers have a bad reputation. In my view, it's one of the key things that that the Consumer Board, the SRA and the Law Society should work on that reputation, because it's completely misconstrued. But so people already think, oh, I'm not going near those untrustworthy people. And so they don't. They ask, they don't believe they can look up and see a fair review, but they believe their cousin or their dentist. It's not simply people's behaviours, it's what the law means to them, and how they see lawyers is a big part of it.
Thank you. Rachel, have you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, we get clients, the vast majority of people who are referred to us are referred by other lawyers, solicitors, or other professional service providers. But we do have more and more clients coming to us who have seen our online presence, and then they will specifically say they came to us in particular because of the reviews that they can see online. And funnily enough, I was doing a bit of work this morning about changing review platform to something that's a bit more recognised, and asking my LinkedIn followers which platform they use and which works and which doesn't, because I do think they are going to become more prevalent as time goes on. You know, the popular ones are Trustpilot, FIFO, there's reviews.co.uk. And I do think as the younger generation comes through, they're going to want an online offering, and they're going to be relying a lot more on what they see on the internet when people have left their opinions of their experiences of using law firms. So I think you still have to cater for both markets, just like my firm is trying to cater for those clients that want to see somebody face to face, but also those clients that want to see people or not see people and deal with their affairs purely online. I think you have to still be in both camps. I don't think you need to choose whether or not you want to be a so-called traditional firm or an online practice. I think there's still plenty of clients out there who want a bit of both, or want one type of service for one legal problem and a different type of service for something else.
It's really interesting. Any more questions from the audience? Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Ajaz Ahmed. I promised myself I wouldn't ask another question, but I'm sorry, I'm going to have to. So I described myself as a retailer before. I worked in retail for 17 years, and I now write a column for Retail Week, which is the industry publication. But I'm actually the founder of the largest internet company in the UK ever, which was here right in Leeds. And I'm also the chairman of a company that builds large websites as well. So it's an area that I understand. I've also worked in law for the last 10 years, helping a law firm change its business. And I think my observations are that the thing that lawyers lack is empathy. They really don't understand from the customer's perspective. Most websites that you visit are very poorly designed. They've got pictures of lawyers looking very smug, unfortunately, smiling. Even on the page that talks about probate, so somebody's just died and there's a picture of a lawyer doing that. And they just don't. So I'm one of these affluent people, and the thing that I'm interested in is the quality of service and, most of all, the price. The other thing lawyers don't understand is that I pay £22 a month for my dentist because I go there every 3 months. But law is a distressed purchase mostly. I've only ever bought a house once in my life. So the only time I'm going to see a lawyer is if I've got a problem. It's not like a dentist at all. And when I look at various websites, it's actually a very, very frustrating experience trying to decide which law firm to actually use. So I think word of mouth is actually, or a review is one of the most popular methods, simply because looking at 3 or 4 websites is a very, very distressing thing to do. And that's what lawyers need to do. They need to understand from the other perspective. And most websites, by the way, law websites, they can't actually write plain English. They're very, very, they can write a contract, but they can't write in a language that somebody, a normal person would be able to understand. They mostly write about themselves. They write about how good they are. They write about which university they went to. But what they need to understand is, I don't really care. I'm interested in, I've got a problem, and can you actually solve my problem?
I think you've kept your promise about not asking a question.
Well done.
But if I can now push you to break that promise, is there a question for the panel on the back of that? Very interesting.
When is the legal industry going to look at things from a customer's perspective and have empathy with the customer that's paying the bills?
Look, I think it sort of, that's a question that leads into a number of themes for today. But if you're, as part of having to embrace technology via law centres, I was sent on something called a digital fellowship. And as I say, I needed that like a hole in the head. But I couldn't get the money if I didn't go to the fellowship. So I referenced earlier the need for money. So I went to the fellowship. But what I discovered there is that if you design anything, any service or system using a lot of the new sort of agile development process, it involves you developing it from the ground up. So if you're talking about websites or reviews or selling yourself to people, what you have to do and how you have to start is exactly what the tech industry does. You have to do the research, you have to talk to the people who you work with, and you have to build it with them in mind. And that's the solution. And to understand that design is critical. It's not good enough to, just take a template, as you say, with the photo and the dark blue, everything's dark blue. You really have to think about what that design is and how people interface with it and use it. So I was probably a fairly stark description you gave, but not necessarily untrue.
Okay. Rachel.
I think what you were saying is really interesting, and I think it does ring true of some law firms. But I mean, I'm really proud of our website, and we do get a lot of positive feedback from it. We have a lot of downloadable resources, fact sheets, ebooks, different ways to contact us, payment online facility, a client intake process, a callback request feature. We are doing a lot of work to try and make our website not look like a traditional boring, lawyer's website. And I think that if you're going to be standing out to a client online, you have to put that effort in. But obviously it does take a lot of time and investment, and it's a never-ending process, a website. I think there's still some people in business, not just in law, that think you get your website up and that's it. But it is something that we work on every day. I think I probably email my website guy every day with, can you put this new fact sheet up, or can you change this, or can we do that? And I think that's the mindset that you have to have if you're going to create an online presence, as more and more people are going to be relying on what you look like online and the reviews online before they make a shopping decision.
Yeah. Laura, is there anything you want to...
Yeah, no, I completely agreed with you when you said consumers don't want to go to 4 different websites, and I don't think that they would in 5 years' time. I think they want to go to a central website, so a price comparison website, for example, that, pulls in information about prices and quality, because you're absolutely right as well, that quality does matter to consumers. So what can service providers do? Providers can work with other businesses, like intermediaries, like price comparison website, review website, and not resist that change, because that's where consumers are heading.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions? Okay, over here, yeah, thanks.
Rachel, you warned that you were going to get on your soapbox about the regulation of the profession. Please, can you get on your soapbox?
The reason I said that is because I think technology and regulation can go hand in hand, because we are constrained by our regulation to some degree when it comes to innovating our legal services and being able, there are obviously unregulated lawyers out there doing all sorts of things that we wouldn't be able to do for one reason or another. And a lot of those things that the unregulated providers are doing are making the most of what features are available online. And I think the SRA could be doing more to promote ourselves, to promote us as a regulated profession, for that to be our USP, because I think with all this talk of innovation and all these buzzwords flying around to do with technology, I think we've lost somewhere we've lost the fact that as a regulated profession we do have something different to offer the consumer, and I think that at the moment doesn't form part of many buying decisions when Joe Bloggs off the street comes to making a decision about which legal professional to use. And I think if we all got together and made the most of being regulated and educated the public about the benefits and what that means, I think we'll stand out much better than we might do at the moment.
Thanks. We're doing quite a lot about this, but it's not. I'm not here to talk about that on this panel, but grab me at lunch if you want to know more about that. What really interesting is actually is you said that you have the two different offerings, if you like, the online, the in person. How do you sort of differentiate them, and how do you differentiate in terms of you're buying, a certain service here and you get a lot more over here, but this one is still good for you, if you get what I mean?
I think I know what you're getting at. So if you think about, the way I've approached certain of our services is a little bit like how you might buy insurance, for instance. You go on and there'll be 3 tiers. There might be like gold, silver and platinum, or whatever you want to call it. And I've tried to emulate that, I suppose, in one way or another, because there'll be people out there who want a little bit extra, and there'll be people out there who have a certain amount of knowledge, quite happy to tap a few boxes and press send, and there you go. So we have probably 3 tiers of service for example, making a will. We have our director level service, our solicitor service, and our online offering. And then that gives the consumer a choice about what service and how much they want to pay as well for that service, and how much assistance they need. Sometimes you'll get somebody who's really knowledgeable, who knows exactly what they need, and that's fine. Other times you'll have a client that needs a little bit more hand-holding, and I think you should always have that extra option available.
Yeah. Julie, do you want to...
I think one of the problems with this is though it requires a knowledgeable customer, and one of the things, there's lots and lots of talk about the legal market and deregulating the legal market so it can thrive, etc. But that assumes a client who knows, number one, how to compare products, not to compare apples with peaches, and even people don't know what the value of a legal service is. So it's one thing to say you get £100 worth, but they don't know whether that's good value for money. So I think there, in terms of regulation or not, there actually needs to be a bit of thought and debate around, what the value is and how you can signify that to people who aren't necessarily the people we work with, but perhaps me when I want to have a will done or something else. So there's more to it than just price or the smiling face or, the personal testimonial.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think it's up to us. That's our responsibility to communicate that to our clients, either on our website or in different literature or when we're talking to them on the phone.
Yeah. Thank you. My clients, most of them English, well, they speak English, it's definitely their second language, and it's often broken English. They're vulnerable people. So obviously, you need to have a different way of approaching people like that, which is what I think you're all saying. Some of them are illiterate. And those people need, they do need legal services very much so.
Yeah. I think that's a challenge that Julie's very familiar with.
It is, and obviously these are people that we work with, as do you, and that's the thing, they don't know where to go or how to go. But I do think that Citizens Advice are doing brilliant work with their online offering. They're if you Google Citizens Advice, they've got lots and lots of information online. They've had help from the Government Digital Service. It's really well written, really well packaged. There is a need for it to be translated, multi-language platform, but that's just seconds away, really. Lots more work with chatbots, a lot of MingCap, for instance, which is directed at people with mental health issues, obviously. They're developing some really nice work, initial triage work that uses both people and chatbots. I think we're at a moment of flux now, and this will happen. And the advantage of that is that rather than having to be literate or speak English, there will be other entry points into it, and that's certainly what we're thinking of. One of the best things that we've done in the digital field is a little SMS tool, because people have a phone, as I said, and everyone can use SMS, and it's amazing how well that has worked. And it started off just to not simply remind people of their appointment, but telling them to bring their documents with them, because it's not good enough to show up. You've got to use the time. And that has been very popular. It's been very well used. But what we've found is that clients are now using that as a mechanism to communicate with their lawyer or with the centre, and that can be translated into other languages. So that's our next part, but we're already doing it in a couple of languages. So it's true. Short communication, understanding communication from the client's perspective is key to making this work.
Yeah, sorry, go on, Rachel.
I was say, I think it's our responsibility as well when you get a new client to ask them how they want you to communicate, how they want you to communicate with them. So I think you need to be asking them, do they need something in large print or audio? Do they want to receive emails, and how frequently do they want to receive emails? Would they rather receive letters? But I think it's just all common sense, really. I think technology is one thing, but let's not lose sight of the fact that everyone's an individual and people have different preferences about how they want to be communicated with, be that online or not.
Okay. Do you have any more questions? Yeah, thanks.
Taking up Julie's point about apples and pears, this is really more of a question for the SRA, because of course there are going to be different levels of regulation. And is there a potential conflict of interest in representing solicitors with regard to that?
Sorry, in representing solicitors, what do you mean by that?
So far as the different levels of regulation, I think perhaps there's an assumption, and I may be wrong, that we're today talking about fully regulated, but there are going to be semi-regulated solicitors. So,
I mean, the changes are coming in. All solicitors will be regulated, bound by a code of conduct, have to meet the same standards as others, but they'll be able to work in different types of businesses, and those businesses won't be regulated by us. We're doing that to try and improve access and to adapt to what's happening there anyway. There are requirements on solicitors to provide information. We are doing things like our digital badge, which regulated firms use. People click on them, it says what protections are in that. You get from going to a regulated firm. We're doing various other kind of communications, but our view is that there's a problem here. This is a potential way to improve on that situation, and we'll monitor what happens in practice. But I have to talk about on lunch. I don't want to waste the time of well, not waste the time, but we have the panel here as the experts. You can talk to me anytime. So any other questions more for the... Oh, sorry, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I think I did want to say something around, I think the point that you're making is that there will be variations in consumer protection. And so linking that to the other question earlier around, are we missing a trick? The advantage for a fully regulated solicitor that is contributing fully to a PII compensation fund would be to be transparent about those, because that might be the differentiating factor in a consumer choosing your service.
And I guess it goes back to Rachel's point about
educating about what's available.
Yeah. Okay. Any final questions? No. But we just ask the panel very quickly, in a sentence, the one thing you would like the audience to take away with them based on this discussion. I'll start with you, Rachel.
Oh, gosh.
Sorry. You were looking at me. It's your fault.
One thing to take away?
One thing you would like the audience to take away.
As much as I love the internet and I work on the website all the time, I think there's one thing I would definitely say is it's not all about the internet. That would be my one takeaway from that.
Thanks. Lola?
Mine is transparency matters. Consumers want to know.
Good, thank you. Julie?
I think it's probably don't equate access to legal information with access to justice. They're two very different things.
Okay. Thank you very much. So we're going to say thank you to our panel. So there now is lunch outside. There will be feedback forms being sent to you. So please do